Welcome to 2016 Presidential Candidate Interviews. Today I am interviewing Stephen Patterson. Mr. Patterson is running as a Republican. Hello, Mr. Patterson, and welcome to 2016 Presidential Candidate Interviews. Thank you for taking the time to participate. How are you doing today?
My pleasure. Oh, real good.
Good. Are you ready for some short icebreaker questions so people can kind of get comfortable with you as a person?
Yes.
Okay, can you describe your family and home life?
Oh, I have a good but small family. It's just me, my wife, and my daughter. Met my wife back in 2005, and she was living in the Philippines at the time. Dated for a couple of years, married her, brought her over, and our daughter was born in 2010.
Can you describe your employment or your work experience?
Oh, I've had many jobs in my life. Right now I work for an airline, and all we do is handle the luggage and any cargo and mail and freight. So we make sure that gets on with no problems. I also worked as a bus driver, a cab driver, construction, sales, and fast food and convenience stores and security.
All right, what are your hobbies and interests? What do you like to do in your free time?
My free time, I like to bowl, travel, and whenever I get a free chance, watch movies.
All right. What are your favorite places to eat out if you like to eat out?
It depends on the state. Every state has a good one. I go to a lot of different states. My favorite is anything with good seafood and pizza.
All right. Do you have a favorite kind of guilty pleasure fast food restaurant you like to eat?
Well, when I get a chance to go to fast food, I usually go to Taco Bell or Wendy's.
All right. How about some favorite junk food, stuff you eat, at 1 in the morning when you're alone in a dark, secluded place?
Well, most of the time I eat regular home-cooked meals, but when I do have junk food, and it's not the fast food itself of Taco Bell or Wendy's, I think my favorite would be just a nice dish of ice cream.
All right. Do you have any favorite TV shows or movies?
Oh, I love lots of TV and movies. My favorite movies would be anything with comedy or martial arts, as well as good reproduction of a Shakespeare work. And TV, mostly on history, anything on history.
All right, how about any pets, dogs, cats, reptiles?
No, don't own any pets right now. We used to. Me and my wife, we both love dogs. We're a dog family, but we don't have any right now.
Do you have any songs that you consider kind of your life motto or your something that describes who you are?
Yeah, I'd have to say that's the Little River Band's song called Cool Change.
All right. Well, we're done with the softball questions. We're going to move into the serious issue-based questions now. When you're done giving your answer, can you just give maybe a brief pause or say, I'm finished? That way,
okay,
I'm not kind of talking over you or doing the little parade after every time you say something.
Okay.
Thank you. Why are you running for president? Name some unique abilities you have that you would bring to the office.
Well, I'm running for president because I was raised to believe that when you complain about politics, that when you have a problem with politics, there's only two things you can do. You can either shut up and accept it or do something about it yourself. And I see that all these candidates, every election, it keeps getting worse and worse. And people fall into the same excuse for their votes. They always say, lesser of the two evils. For me, evil is evil, so why vote for one over the other? So I decided to run just to fight for both the workers and the soldiers. I don't confuse the soldiers with the military. They're two different things, but I believe in the soldiers having the utmost respect, and the workers deserve more. That way that they can bring back their families. Our grandparents used to raise 10 plus children. They raised a large family on one income, and now you're struggling to make ends meet with one income for two people. So it's time to actually look out for the workers more, because the more they have, the more they spend. And I'm done with that.
Are there any presidents? Are there any presidents that you kind of like that have aspects of their presidency that you would try and emulate?
Two, Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. Abraham Lincoln said the job of the government is to do for the people that which they cannot do for themselves. And most of the things that we have now, we definitely can choose for ourselves. And with Kennedy, he was out for the families as well and wanted less government. One of his major goals that he never accomplished was ending the CIA. But, both of them, they both looked out for people no matter who they were, and they put families first.
Can you name a president or two that you would try not to emulate, and why?
Over history, there's a lot of them. But I think the two main ones, I'd have to go with recent history, and that's George W. Bush and Barack Obama, because with George W. Bush, he put businesses first. And I understand how business is important. They are. They need some help. They don't need the corporate welfare that they're getting. And Obama, he seems to disengage a lot of what people really need. He knows how to talk. I give him full credit. He is a very well-spoken person, but everything he says is almost like a script where it's what people want to hear, and then what he does is something completely opposite. I believe that if you say something, that's what you need to do.
Okay. Are there any areas of government or any functions of government that you would like to cut or abolish, and why?
Well, as much as I would love to agree that we need to cut the IRS, that's not really an option, because you still need the agency to collect the taxes. But I do believe in, or should I say that they wanted to abolish them. I cannot abolish them, but I could cut them, because there's a lot of different taxes that they do not need to collect, and they seem to be targeting the wrong people for their tax collections. They want to make a statement more than anything. So I would cut back on the IRS. I would fight to abolish the CIA, because that's kind of redundant to have central intelligence that it's not legal for them to operate in the U.S., and yet there are agencies. They should be, if they're truly a government agency, they should be able to operate here. And most of their information seems to either be outdated or lies that their informants or whoever are giving them, and there's no accountability. So I would get rid of the CIA and roll the remaining portion of it up into the FBI. And I also believe in cutting the Federal Reserve, because the Federal Reserve has turned it into a private banking industry, where when we bailed out the banks under Bush, the banks that got bailed out, it seems ironic that their executives sit on the board of directors for the Federal Reserve. So they're bailing out themselves with their own money that they don't even have.
Are there any areas of government you'd like to add to or increase?
I'd like to actually go against the grain on a lot of Republicans and add to the health care, because, when the Health and Human Services would need more, not in insurance itself like the Obamacare, because insurance is just a discount program. We have to do something about the actual costs. So, like, for example, you can get just a bed at a hospital when you check in for about $500 a night. It's not a 5-star hotel, so why are they charging that much? They need to be able to step in and regulate the costs to some degree, not a full scale. Like, you cannot tell the doctors that they can only get like $30 an hour. So that's a high trained, highly skilled profession. So they deserve every dollar they get. But there are some areas that need to be controlled for the costs. I would also like to expand on education, because especially on high school and elementary. College, you get what you pay for. I do believe in people saving for their college education. You want the best, you should pay for it. But your high school and elementary, those are prerequisites. So that's not an option. You have to have those. So with those, I'd like better education for their children with more teachers. It's not a what's that called? They want the core curriculum,
right?
And I don't believe in the Common Core. And I don't believe in Common Core because Common Core doesn't take into account that all students have different learning scales, and all students have different ways of dealing with the schools. So they need a more one-on-one to some degree with the teachers so they can get a better education.
Can you describe your stance on taxes?
My stand on taxes is almost like, believe it or not, the Democrats, almost, because they want to increase taxes on the corporations. We should increase taxes on corporations, but don't give them the corporate welfare. We should have actually a cap on that pay gap between the executives and their hourly workers. I would suggest 30-1, so that they should make only 30 times what their average hourly worker makes. But the taxes on the individual, I'm not really keen on distinguishing between the executives and the workers when it comes to personal income tax. I can side with a flat tax, but if you keep it standard where if you pass a certain rate, you might pay more, but you still keep the personal income tax low. It's the corporate taxes that need to be higher, because they're the ones making all the money. And even if the executives make a couple of million, the corporation is making billions. So that's where all the money's at. And if they want the services, that's the best area to get the services from. I also don't believe in a lot of the tax breaks that they have now. I think that tax breaks that they get for corporations, any write-offs should be in regard to how they handle their employees and their actual business structure itself. So, like, they would get 200% tax write-off for each hourly employee that's full-time, 125 to 150% for part-time, 75% who don't even make part-time, and their salary workers 100%, they'd be able to write off. All benefits, 200%. When it comes to the structure of their business, I think if they own the building, they get to write it off. If they rent the building, they get to write off the rent. That's for your corporations. Your small businesses, they would get about half that tax. If you make under around $2 billion a year, to me, you're considered a small business. Even $5 billion, you're considered a small business. You're making billions, you're a big business. You can afford more, so they can be taxed more. I also believe that you give them the first, for employees, or not employees, for your income tax, the first $100,000 is just deducted. So if you make $125,000 this year, you should be taxed on the $25,000, but then you should also get like $5,000 credit for each member of the family, each dependent. So if you have yourself and your wife and 2 kids, that would be $20,000. So you should be taxed on the remaining $5,000. So you just give them that simple tax break. Corporation tax breaks are just for your employees and running the business, not for different corporations. They want to write off stuff like your materials needed. No, that's part of doing business. You're a cab company, you don't write off the car. If you're an airline, you don't write off the plane. You write off the building, you write off the utilities needed. But that's about all.
Can you describe your stance on the abortion pro-choice issue?
I'm very much anti-abortion, but when people get involved in telling others what they can and cannot do with their body, I don't side with that. I believe if a woman chooses to have an abortion, that's her business. But at the same time, it should not be funded in any way, shape, or form with tax dollars. If a couple get married and they agree before the marriage that they're against abortion, and she chooses an abortion, the husband should have the right to walk away from the marriage with no strings attached, no alimony, nothing, because it's kind of like a breach of contract, as long as you can both prove that you were against it before you got married.
All right. What role should the United States military play in the world?
I believe we should close almost all bases, if not all bases overseas. Maybe if we keep about 2 to 3 is about all we need. We shouldn't be the world police. But I do understand that we live in a dangerous time. Most of it is caused by our own actions. When we sell weapons to foreign enemies to help fight foreign enemies, they turn to attack us in place. But I would personally, I would fight to close all the bases overseas. Bring the soldiers home. Let them defend here. And most of the fighting crew, you know how they say you cannot have the military fighting against their own people. I'm not bringing them here to do that. I'm bringing them here to protect America in case America is attacked. However, most of the weaponry, most of the fighting crews, I would use at the border. Instead of using Border Patrol, use the military, because they're better equipped and better trained to handle all of that. And if we come down to a war that we have to fight overseas, we have other technology to use, like the drones. If we have to send military overseas, that's why we would keep at the minimum 3 bases open. But we should not be the world police.
How would you handle immigration and border security?
Immigration, I agree with a lot that we have to have the wall built, a really big and strong wall to keep them out. However, I also want to have that manned by, like I said, the military. I I would love to be able to deport everyone here illegally. It's not really plausible, but if we can get the border under control so we can shut off all illegals coming in, then anyone here already could be used, could be on a so-called path to citizenship if they would. But there's prerequisites for that citizenship. One, they have, if they're above the age of 25, they have to serve at least 5 years in the military. They automatically have to serve. And they also have to pay $25,000 for the penalty for each member of their family. Now, that could be done over payments. I understand no one has $25,000 just to fork over, but they also have no right to vote or own a gun in America until that fee is paid or they become a citizen, whichever one is the latter.
How do you perceive the issues of race and discrimination in America? Do we still face challenges? If yes, what kind of challenges do we still face?
We'll always face challenges, I believe, because of both sides. There's been wrong dealings with people because people live out of fear a lot. And you have a lot of these new police officers out there, when they stop someone on the street that's of another race, they automatically have a preconceived notion that sets them at a higher defense. So if they see one move, they might shoot. Is it racist? A little bit. I'm not going to deny that, and I'm not defending it in any way. They need better training, for one. But other people are actually making matters worse, saying that some things are racist that are not even close to being racist, just because of their preconceived notions. So I believe that in order to actually get racism under control, we just all have to understand who we really are. If killing is wrong based on race, why aren't they complaining about blacks killing blacks or whites killing whites or Hispanics killing Hispanics? They have a lot of those. But it's only when one race attacks another that people get all upset and consider it racist. It's just, we're all people. When people start looking at each other as brother and sister, mother and father, then we'll all actually understand each other better, and we won't have to worry about race because it won't be a factor.
All right, what role does the federal government play in healthcare, in your opinion?
Healthcare, they play a big role right now, but it's usually the wrong role because they're trying to control the insurance aspect. And it's not the insurance that's the problem, it's the cost. If insurance was the problem, people would have had insurance a long time ago. It's when you go in and you have, I, for example, have good insurance, but when I go in, I went in for appendix taken out, I still had to pay almost $2,500. And my wife had to pay $2,000 for the birth of our child. Now, those two, she got a better discount. I can't deny that. But it's still, when you break down the cost of what the insurance is paying, that's not a good thing because all the smaller stuff like pain medicine, the hospital bed, the x-rays, all that is just astronomical. So they need to actually play a different role and control costs, not control insurance.
What priority would you give for repairing of infrastructure, and what is the role of the federal government in maintaining infrastructure?
The infrastructure, I think, is pretty much just transportation, believe it or not. Businesses can handle themselves. If they want to build their buildings, they can. They also have to work on the parks because nature is just what we need around. If we got rid of all trees and all lakes for corporate need or for personal need, that's not going to help us any. So we need the parks to be maintained in a well manner, and transportation. The roads are constantly being fixed for potholes. I think we have one of the worst roads in the world. I've seen lots of countries that you drive around and not one single bump. But we also have to understand that the roads are getting very congested. We need a better high-speed rail system, if you would. So we should also focus on building a high-speed rail system throughout this country so it can actually alleviate some of the congestions from the road. That way there's less road damage and easier commutes for people.
Where do you stand on the issue of personal privacy and the need to protect our nation from terrorists? What's the happy medium between keeping our eyes open?
Well, personal privacy is very, very important. I don't think the government has the right to, barring any court order. If they need to get a court order, then so be it. That's fine. But without a court order, they should not be able to go into your email, your surfing history, into your phone records. With a court order, that's all fair game because they have evidence to show of either a crime or a plan of a crime. But without that, people still have the right to not have their personal information seized by the government. And with regards to national security, we can actually monitor. Now that applies to the issue on your privacy applies to Americans over here. We can still monitor any conversations going on overseas. We can feel free to do that. If we have information, if we have informants telling us what's being planned, we can check that out. If it turns out to be reputable and real, then we can go and get either a court order or do whatever we have to. We should always stand up against any attack on this soil. If it's an attack on another soil, we can give them information. But they're responsible for defending themselves. We should not be defending them.
What role does faith, religion, spirituality, etc. play in your life, and what type of role would it play for you as president? There's really not a right or wrong answer on this. It's just some people are interested in where you stand or don't stand on these types of things.
Okay, I believe that religion is a very important part of my life. I was raised Catholic. I went to a Free Methodist school. I've had friends of all religions, every single one. I believe faith can help people live their life in a better way. It's all about how you treat each other, which faith is supposed to be about. But I also believe that faith should not be a part of a campaign or the way you run the government, because once you put faith in there, then you are actually telling others how they might be wrong, and you're right. Just treat people in a kind, compassionate way and be honest and straightforward with them, and it should work itself out. But how you live your life, that's where faith has the most strength.
Okay, be a political forecaster. Predict maybe one or two major problems facing our country in the future that no one is talking about. And what would you do to prepare America for these things?
Well, they are talking to some degree. They're talking about how people are struggling. But I see it getting worse because, like I said earlier, our grandparents raised a large family with one income. And now we're struggling with one income for a family of two. So they can argue minimum wage. They can argue corporate welfare all day long. But until people are actually brought up to a living wage where it's not so far below the executives, where they're making thousands of times more than the workers, which I see it happening, that executives will go up in pay while the rest of us just barely move. And the poor comes up to the middle class, and then there will be no middle class. There'll be just two groups. And that's going to destroy America, because when everyone's struggling just to make ends meet for themselves, we're down to a family of 3 or 4, and they're struggling. But when we get down to a single person who struggles just for themselves, we're not that far off from that right now. And also I see us in a major war, and most of it is caused by our own actions. When we give weapons to terrorist groups to fight terrorist groups, and then say, well, we didn't expect them to do that. Well, it's the nature of the beast. When you go into another country and you give an enemy of that people weapons to fight for you, they're already not thinking the same way we are. They're thinking like their country does. They're just mad about certain issues. So they're going to turn around and use those weapons on us sooner or later. And then we act shocked when our soldiers die over there. It's actually caused by us. But I think that people need to wake up and see how the government is playing games, almost like a high-stake chess game, and we're the pawns.
What are your weaknesses, and what would you do to make up for your weaknesses? Just, if you're honest with yourself and you say, man, I'm not too strong in this area. Are there areas that you might need help in as president? Issues?
Well, my main weakness right now, and I got lots of them, everybody does, but my main weakness is no experience in politics. I can overcome that by just fighting for people, because, like I said, Lincoln said, the job of the government is to do for the people that which they cannot do for themselves. If I already know how to live my life, then I can assume that people know how to live their life. But if I need help with something, they need help with something. And I'm at a better, we are all down, all the workers, we're all in a better area to know what people need, because we're living it on a daily basis. Other weaknesses I have, no president knows everything. So you have to actually, your cabinet is the biggest strength you have. Bill Clinton had one of the best cabinets because everybody was educated in that field. So if you get someone for the Department of Health and Human Services, they have to know about health. You get someone who's knowledgeable on transportation for that area. You want someone for your security, you get someone from the military, a high ranking, someone who knows. But you have to get the best qualified, because no president knows how to handle any of that. That's why they need their advisors. So if you have a strong cabinet, you'll have a strong presidency.
Are there other issues you want to discuss?
Only issues that are important to me right now are the workers and the soldiers and immigration, because the workers, if we don't have the jobs in America, then we're gonna be suffering. And before we can bring immigrants over to take jobs, we should make sure that every American has a job. As long as that American is willing to work, they should have a job. If they're not willing to work, they shouldn't get a handout either. There's no free ride in life. But I think also our soldiers especially deserve the most respect. We praise them left and right, which is good. But when we have groups like Wounded Warrior, who are a very good organization, but they shouldn't have to do that for the soldiers. That should be our government's job. The taxpayers pay that, and I'm proud to pay my taxes for that. If our soldiers need a house, they should be able to get a house, not put up in homeless shelters for veterans. I don't agree with that. But they fought for us. They risked everything for us. They've done their job for their country. The least our country could do is make sure that they don't have any wants anything in life that they want for. Everything should be covered for them. They pay the ultimate price.
Okay, we're at the end of the interview now. Just time for some closing remarks. In 2 minutes or less, tell us why we should vote for you.
I wish I could honestly say why, because everybody wants to spend time with their families. I would rather spend time with my daughter. She's at an age now that, spending with her is important. But if with these candidates that we have, her future, their children's future, all of our futures are looking quite shaky. I think people should vote for me because I put families first. I put the soldiers first. I'm not out for corporations. I'm out for people.
Okay, and that's the end of the interview. Thank you, Mr. Patterson, for participating in the interview, and thanks again to my listeners for listening to 2016 presidential candidate interviews. Be sure to check back in the future for more interviews. Have a good day, and remember to keep informed, passionate, and involved. Thanks again, Mr. Patterson.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too.